Hello, welcome to our second panel of today, I guess. So we will be talking about an issue that I have been personally interested in since the early days that I started doing fact-checking in Turkey, because there were the times when we were looking for examples in the global scale to get the lessons so we could be able to start a fact-checking organization in Turkey. And I'm feeling really honored and privileged to have the leaders of fact-checking that I had a deep dive when I had the chance to study fact-checking organizations in the United States. So thank you very much for being here, Mr. Kiely and Angie. And also we have David and Emmanuel, who are going to be helping us to move the discussion from a different standpoint with a focus on topical areas on fact-checking like health and science. And we are, again, very fortunate to have two of you who are kind of pioneers in these topical areas, especially in health and science. So I would like to first start with Eugene and to hear his thoughts about how you think the evolution of fact-checking took place, since you are actually the first fact-checking organization that started doing this in a dedicated manner in early 2000s. So your thoughts and observation about the change and evolution of the practice from a political fact-checking standpoint to a broader coverage in fact-checking, that would be great to hear for our audience as well, I guess.
Right. Well, when FactCheck.org began in 2003, the focus was on TV ads. Because the director of the Edinburgh Public Policy Center came up with this methodology for fact-checking TV ads. So that was the focus. And everything has spread, since then. Since then we created something called Ask FactCheck in 2007, which was responding to readers' questions. At the time, it was viral emails. Now it's viral deceptions on the internet, but the questions are the same. Is this true? They'll pass along something and ask if it's true. We have SciCheck, which we started in January 2015, which focuses just on science claims. So that deals with vaccinations and GMO and climate change and the like. And of course, now we're working with Facebook on the Facebook initiative, so we have 2 people dedicated just to that project. So yeah, it's come a long way from just looking at TV ads, which we still do, in addition to everything else.
That's great. I mean, because as there was one of the first books that I have read on fact-checking was Lucas Graves' book, and there was an outstanding example of how the practice started in early 1990s, I guess, with another examples of political advertisements, focusing on political advertisements. And now we are talking about more areas on fact-checking, and also Angie and Politifact are kind of first examples of focusing on pundits, in addition to your regular coverage of political actors. So do you think that's also something that you think as a starting point of the expansion of the field of fact-checking, when you decided to focus on the pundits as well, in addition to the politicians? Because in personal case and also very familiar case that I am with, some organizations are more limiting themselves with political actors, but others are trying to cover a broader concept. So do you think this also has a future potential areas to grow?
We were several years into the Politifact project when we started our project called Pundit Fact. And that project was recognizing that there are all these TV personalities in America who are usually on cable television, sometimes on radio, and they comment on the news, and they're just as influential as some of the elected officials. So we're talking about people like Sean Hannity or Rachel Maddow or Rush Limbaugh. There's a whole subgroup of pundits who go on Sunday morning news shows to comment on politics specifically. So with Pundit Fact, we were just expanding our portfolio of fact-checking to these people who weren't elected, they weren't accountable to the public, but they did make lots of provocative claims. The other thing that really launched us into healthcare fact-checking was because healthcare was a political topic in the United States. During Barack Obama's 2008 campaign, healthcare was one of the main topics. When he took office in 2009, the Democrats, his party, started drafting healthcare legislation. And this was right after Politifact had covered the election, so it was our first time covering the day-to-day work of the federal government. And the healthcare law, the drafting of that healthcare law just captured the public's attention in ways that a lot of other legislation did not, because everybody has an opinion on healthcare, because everyone has to get healthcare. So in the US, when you start talking about changing the healthcare system, everybody's first question is, how does this affect me? We saw a lot of misinformation about the drafting of this law. So claims that there were things in the bill that were not in the bills. That claims like all illegal immigrants will get free health care under the health care law was an incorrect claim that was widely spread. The claims that people wouldn't be able to get surgery once the health care law passed. So we found that the politicians were making claims, we found that the pundits were making claims, and all of this fact-checking just generally became a major area for us. So before the Trump administration, healthcare was the #1 topic fact-checked on our website. I think if you looked at it now, immigration would be the #1 topic, but healthcare remains a huge issue in the United States.
Before giving the floor to David and Emmanuel, I just want to ask you, two of you, if you have experienced an expansion in your audience when you found yourself focusing on the areas that are not completely political, but as you say, like health, immigration, and other areas that also implication the political debate in the country. So did it also affect and create an increase in your audience as well?
As I said, science since January 2015. It's true, it depends on the topic. So if it's climate change, yeah, it's going to get a lot of traffic and a lot of interest because there's very highly partisan views about climate change. If it's about Zika, not so much. So it depends on the topic.
Whether it's relevant or not for the...
So much of fact-checking these days in the United States anyway is weaponized. So if they see something that validates their opinion, it's going to get pushed out on social media. And if it doesn't, or it's not really a partisan issue like Zika really wasn't, it doesn't get picked up in the same way that climate change would.
David, you have some cool stuff to share with us. I know. Would you like to start with showing the work of FactCheckorg, especially covering the misinformation, or would you also start maybe telling us about a little bit how FactCheckorg as an organization has a strong footprint in the continent? I mean, even I have been able to experience or observe that in the last couple of years, the focus that you are putting on health-related misinformation is getting stronger and stronger. So do you think this is something that you had find yourself in a position where you had another chance, or is it the expertise that you are trying to share with your audience?
Well, I'd say that to start with, one of the premises for the founding of FactCheckorg was, health related. So at a point in time in Nigeria when polio vaccines uptake were very low because certain people, certain actors, were basically telling people not to take vaccines, and people were boycotting it. So that event was one of the singular reasons why FactCheckorg was set up. But what we do essentially is around development, which includes politics, but mainly, health and other topics. But over the years, about 2-3 years, specifically for Nigeria, we've noticed that there's been an upsurge in health misinformation and disinformation. And it's a multi-stakeholder problem. It's not just a government problem. It's not just a media problem. It's not just a problem of the big pharmaceutical companies. So we've found ourselves in this, and like the question you asked, we found out that some of our health-focused fact checks have been very popular. Why? Because there's poverty in the country, health indices are bad. People are looking for where to get the right information. Something as simple as, for example, there was Ebola outbreak in Nigeria some years ago, and people were baiting with salt. Were asked to bait with salt and drink salt. And you can imagine how many people died from that, And last year we had a health workshop where we brought different stakeholders into the room, government, health ministries, doctors, scientists, to just sit down and say, look, how do we tackle this issue? It's not just about fact checkers alone. Right. It's like Peter mentioned yesterday, it's a multifaceted problem. So the solution should be multifaceted. So it's not just about we sitting down as fact checkers and saying, oh, we do health fact checking. No, we're saying that, look, we will debunk these things, but the Ministry of Health has to supply data quickly. The doctors have to engage the public with the right data and things like that. So that's how we've evolved over the years from, to doing this.
How do you think your stakeholders, the media, the business, and education, like schools, universities, do they also seem to have the same interest and attention on the possible effects of misinformation, especially when it comes to health-related misinformation?
Oh, yes. Look, I live in the country.
As a fact-checking organization, you think you are creating an impact over different parts of the society as well?
Yeah, we would not like to exaggerate our impact. We would like to think that in some ways, we are helping debunk and reduce the circulation of this. And let me give you an example. Health misinformation in Nigeria has real-life consequences. It's not just about sitting down on a panel. There are people who actually die. So, for example, I used to work on a radio station where we translated a show from English to Hausa. Hausa is one of the most spoken language in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria and some parts of the Sahel. And because of a bad translation, somebody said in Hausa that don't take the vaccines, it's the white man's way of doing something to you. And immediately was transmitted on Wazobia FM in Kano. Kano is one of the biggest cities, northern cities. 8 health workers were killed outside Kano, immediately, within an hour or 2 hours, because the radio is powerful. So you can imagine a case where it's not just about sitting down, it has real-life consequences for people, where they access health care, how they do it, when they do it, and even if they do it.
I mean, when I think about political fact-checking or the more traditional fact-checking, I always think it's a service provided to news consumers mainly. And in our age, the news are mostly being consumed on the internet. So providing your fact checks through your social media channels, through your traditional, sources, I think it has at least the potential to counterbalance the misinformation. But when it comes to misinformation on health in Africa, you say radio is powerful. So as a fact-checking organization, how you at least think to, build tactics and platforms to counterbalance that misinformation spreading, platforms outside of our traditional tools on internet.
Yeah, so what we've done is, the reality is that for a country where internet penetration is quite high, but the guy on the street still depends on his radio. BBC Hausa, for example, is very popular in northern Nigeria. So what we've done is to think creatively by saying, look, we would take our offerings to radio stations. So we've got like 2 radio slots right now in Lagos, and we're trying to expand. And the idea is that we want to reach more people. We want more people to have access to the right information. We want more people to hear the health debunks that we've done, so that they can make better decisions, so they can make informed decisions. So you can imagine I have a video here. I don't know if we can play it. Yes, so the one about the vitamin C, yeah.
No, if you continue taking vitamin C, bet it you can't make it. How can you make it unless you go and stop it and do your deliverance? Is it not ascorbic? Ascorbic acid is not produced anywhere on earth. Ascorbic acid came direct from the deep sea. Some of you see they take Titus. Oh, you can't make everything while you are eating Titus fish. You can't make everything also.
classical example of how health misinformation and disinformation works in Nigeria. The woman you saw in that video is a preacher, a Christian preacher. So she goes on the pulpit and says, don't take ascorbic acid because if you do it, you won't make heaven. Now, for a culture that is, big on religion, big on ethnicity, what do you think is going to happen for those in our congregation who believe her? They probably won't take something as simple as vitamin C. Then the other claim is that vitamin C ascorbic acid is found in the deep sea, which is not true. So that's basic, that's simple. There are other claims that you see, and they have real life consequences. So that's the kind of thing we're dealing with.
You want me to play the other video?
No, it's fine. No, it's fine.
Okay. Vincent, Emmanuel or Vincent? Emmanuel. So when I think about not only the area of the focus, but also the way that you do your fact checking, science feedback is one of the rare examples that I can think about because of its nature of crowdsourced operation. So you started tackling misinformation on climate change. And then now with your new parent organization, you are the science feedback right now, and you have two outlets under the same parent organization, climate feedback and health feedback. So do you think this is something that you have planned beforehand to grow into other areas before you started climate feedback? Or is it just something that your audience asked you or made you to start focusing on health-related misinformation as well?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm Emmanuel. I'm a climate scientist.
And
Can you also play? Yeah, I will do that. And so as a climate scientist, I started coming in the business of fact-checking, if you want, from a scientific background. And I was working on hurricane, really physics before, so nothing to do with anything journalistic or fact-checking. And I started because I saw that the misinformation in the field of climate was prevalent in the US in the media. So we really started with a verification of the media. That was our aim, and trying to bring scientists to be able to respond and check whether information is correct when it is widely shared. So that's how we started. And from the beginning, we started with this climate feedback project, but right away we secured the science feedback brand and domain, so we already knew that at some point we would expand it. And why health? We realized over the past 4 years when we were working on climate that this was the other very big issue on which platforms contain a lot of misinformation. And so we thought, okay, that's the natural step, the next step. And okay, I just want to tell you a little bit about how we work. So, yeah. So this is a snapshot of our methodology. I'm going to see it better from here. And so basically, we mix scientists with kind of journalists, the editors, in our process. So we are monitoring the news that are trending to pick the topics that we want to check that are the most influential. So that is something that the editors do, and sometimes we get input from the public and scientists as well. And we focus on some claims that are verifiable and widely shared. Then we have this process in which we mainly want the scientists to be at the core of the fact-checking. So they are the ones who, in the case of articles, read the article sentence by sentence and comment on the claims. And they do that collaboratively. So the different scientists can see the comments from each other. So that's important from when they don't have the expertise on every single sentence in the article. So we have an open community. We have now 350 scientists in climate and about 50 on health. It's growing. And we verify only that they have a PhD and top-tier publication in a field that is relevant to what they are commenting on. And yeah, so the goal is to have this open community that can grow. And hopefully, we can bring tens of thousands, ultimately, of scientists in the fact-checking world. So bring the scientific community as a new power in fact-checking. That's the goal. So one step after that is that the scientists rate. So they are the ones who issue the verdict. So in the case of an article, they give a credibility rating to the entire piece. So it's from very low to very high. So it's a very 5-star kind of rating. And then again, the editors take this scientist comment, they might improve them, add references, add figures, and then provide feedback to journalists. So that's really how we started, providing feedback to editors and journalists, trying to either get corrections or improve the standards of the different outlets. So that's the framework we use, and I'm showing that because the point one is just facts, fact-checking as we understand it in a very strict way, but there are many other things that we need to check when we do fact-checking in the scientific fields. So, of course, the main business of scientists is not to produce facts, but explanations. So having hypotheses and testing them. So that's also something that we test in the claims or articles we review. And also the logic, how you come to conclusion based on all the sets of facts that you have assembled. So that's the guidelines that we give to scientists, these 6 items to guide their credibility scoring. So we try to have them score in a consistent manner. But because we have several scientists scoring each time, we can also have a view of whether the scientists agree or not. So 2 quick examples. One here on the climatefeedback.org website about a review of an article. So we review article claims, and we also have this insights category. And in this case, you see that we have this post written, the title is written by the editors, us, but then most of the content and the rating that you see here as a scientific credibility rating is given by the scientists. So the 6 reviewers here give each a rating, and in this case, it's only -1 or -2, so it means this article that claims that civilization is going to come to an end in 30 years doesn't have basis, or there is no scientific evidence to support that, basically. That's what the scientists say. And that was very widely shared. So a case of, not denying climate change, but over exaggerating the impact. And that's another example to show what it looks like in the case of claim reviews. So that's on the healthfeedback.org website. And in this case, again, we have 3 scholars, professors review the claim. And that's a very popular claim on Facebook. Even though it's old, from 2017, it comes back again and again. So that's why we checked it from the Facebook partnership. And in that case, again, the reviewers, they propose the verdict, and we, at the end, simply reflect what they told us. And yeah, I don't want to enter into the detail of what is being fact-checked exactly, but the topic is about the classic, vaccine cause whatever, and in this case, encephalopathy. Reviewers say is incorrect. So yeah, I invite you to check this website, climatefeedback.org and healthfeedback.org. And we also have insights articles where we build on the fact checks that we've done. For instance, on the insight segment of Health Feedback, we have studied the credibility of the 100 most influential stories of 2018. So you have 100 stories evaluated with this scale of credibility, and it shows that about 50% of the 100 most shared stories were misleading or false. So that's also something that's been taken by other journalists, and yeah, I encourage you also to do that. Like, based on the fact check, create more investigative, insight kind of articles. So that's it.
I'm also interested to hear more about how you are able to build a common understanding and a common approach among your reviewers, in other terms, your fact checkers, because I'm sure this is some of the, not the biggest maybe, but the most visible problems that many new starting fact-checking organizations have, to build a methodology that all their fact checkers can follow before coming to a verdict or a conclusion. So, I mean, you are just working with scientists. So probably they are much more accustomed to peer review, scientific review, so it will be much more easier for you. But how you make sure that you have a standard in covering misinformation in different areas?
Yeah. So the first thing we have is this process page where we explain our process, and it's both for the public to understand how we come to these verdicts, but especially for the scientists. So we really have a lot of work in terms of email correspondence with them, and we don't control them, so they give their rating freely. But we have this process that we really ask them to pay attention to before they reach the verdict. And as you say, because they are scientists, they are kind of already used to doing that, like reviewing others' work and finding the flaws and So, and one thing that we also keep open is the fact that sometimes they don't agree. And some ratings that you can see on our website are, consist of different kind of ratings. Some people say the article is credible, some not. So in these kind of cases, we just preserve that and show it to say this is the kind of cases when scientists don't agree. So right now, it's more us, the editors, who try to either ask more questions to understand why the claim, they judge it as false, and if we don't see that there is evidence, we ask for evidence. So we have this kind of journalistic work to do. And initially we didn't want to do it, but we realized we need to have this kind of journalistic
Standards.
Yeah. Now what we want to do in the end is have a platform where it's very easy for the scientists to register, and so if we want to scale from 400 reviewers we have now to tens of thousands, which is the goal, make it easier for them to do what they want. Pick the articles they want to check and check it. So we need to reinforce, and in that case we think that the scientists each other can review their own contributions, so then that ensures that there is quality, because if the reviewers don't agree or attack each other's comments, then we might either resolve that or don't show the comments.
I see. I think this is a part of a very long discussion about crowdsourced fact-checking, and I think we don't have the time enough to cover all the challenges, but also the opportunities coming with crowdsourced fact-checking. But I want to hear from David, since I have this feeling like when it comes to health, science, I think there is a higher possibility to mobilize people, because those are the areas where you see the effects on a daily basis. When health-related misinformation spreads in a given country, people pay with their lives as consequences. So do you see a not crowdsourced, but a community as an important part of fighting against misinformation when it comes to health? Because you also said that it's not easy to fight against misinformation because it's coming from all different platforms, from different channels. How do you think this is like a possibility, or do you think it's possible for you to, like fact checkers, to mobilize people against misinformation?
Oh yes, I think that's the way to go. That's the future, in the sense that you cannot sit in Lagos. Lagos is just one state out of 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, and do everything. So you have to create a community. The community will help with surveillance. So if, for example, so for example in Abuja, there were stickers and posters all over the town that they were cures for cancer, and people were going there. Some people were going to those places and they were fleecing them of their money. And what that means is that people will genuinely not go to where they're supposed to go to for proper treatment. You understand? Right. And a couple of people actually flagged it to us that, look, Africa Check, do you know that there's this happening in Abuja? That's the kind of community we're talking about. Health misinformation happens in different languages. Essentially, we have about 200 different languages. So if you create a community, and that's essentially what we're doing. In the next couple of months, we are going to unveil a network of fact checkers, health journalists, health editors, health statisticians, scientists, Ministry of Health officials from the Center for Disease Control, where we all come together to create a network to actually fight and reduce health misinformation and disinformation in Nigeria. In some cases, it's actually deliberate. It's disinformation. Then let me give you a very recent example, and Peter mentioned it yesterday. Right now, there's a scare about Ebola outbreak in Nigeria. And naturally, the Center for Disease Control has come out to say, well, there's nothing to panic about. There's no Ebola in Nigeria yet. But I tell you, people are still panicking. And when there's a scenario, when there's that kind of atmosphere, that is where health misinformation and disinformation thrives. So I do agree with you that creating a community is the way to go, and that's exactly what we are doing. Yes. Please.
There is, for Politifact's healthcare fact-checking efforts, we have had a lot of good fortune getting resources from other parts of the journalism community in the United States. When we started fact-checking the healthcare law, we realized that our reporters, and I was a reporter myself then, we needed more expertise in healthcare. Fortunately, in the United States, there's an Association of Healthcare Journalism that would offer fellowships to journalists who did not normally work on the healthcare beat. And we took advantage of that for several years, sending several of our staff members for this training. Now, most of these journalists were not fact checkers. They were working for newspapers and TV stations and websites. But working with them and getting the training that they offered was very helpful to our fact checking. The other thing that we've done, and this is much more of a recent partnership, is we partnered with a website that focuses only on healthcare. It's called Kaiser Health News. Some of our executive director, Aaron Schrockman, met with one of Kaiser's executives at a conference, and they started sharing the idea that we could work together. We trained them in fact-checking methods, and they've started doing healthcare fact checks. We do our healthcare fact checks, and we share all the content. So we publish their fact checks on our site. They publish our fact checks on their site. It's worked really well. They didn't really know how to fact check until they started working with us. And we have gotten access to some really sophisticated sources, and the journalists there have healthcare depth on a higher level. So that's been a really powerful partnership where we're exchanging expertise. And I believe that I don't think our audiences are exactly the same. So I think we're reaching new audiences that way as well. And then I think Eugene has probably seen this. We're also seeing a lot of healthcare misinformation on Facebook and through the third-party fact-checking project. And that's where we can also bring some of this developed expertise to the platform fact-checking.
Right. Eugene, I mean, I was going to ask you, but Angie gave me the ball to give the pass to you probably. So you're a part of an educational institution, and the FactCheck.org seems to me as an educational resource as well, because in addition to your day-to-day publishing, I think you also serve as a tool for organizations to share their expertise on any given areas, such as like policy, economy, and other areas. You think fact checkers can get the help from outside experts to start fact checking on topical areas and share the expertise on fact checking, so it can be a mutually beneficial collaboration for everyone? Because we seem to have two options: either to do crowdsourced fact-checking on areas that require specific expertise, or as Angie just said, building partnership with more focused outlets with fact-checking organizations, so there's going to be a different publishing that can be appealing to different audiences.
Well, either method could work, either partnering with or having scientists or economists doing their own fact-checking. We're based at the University of Pennsylvania, where there's the Wharton School of Business. They created a separate fact-checking unit there. Had to call them and tell them they can't call it fact-check, but
that's what they do.
That's right. But we can draw on those resources. Right now, one of our reporters is getting a master's in health law, Laurie, who does a lot of our reporting and has been on healthcare since the Obamacare went through in 2010. So there are there's a lot of cross-pollination at the University of Pennsylvania between us and experts, but that is something, as Angie just talked about, can be done anywhere, as long as you find the right people and you partner with the right people.
I mean, I hope this will be a base for the next question I'm going to ask, because I really wonder, and this question is to four of you, and I really look forward to hearing from your thoughts individually. So when we talk about topical fact-checking, we currently limit ourselves with health, climate, and in a broader sense, science. I mean, they all have different categories, but as practitioners of the field, do you foresee in new topical areas that can be a part of the base that we have as fact checkers right now? Would it, I mean, that would be something related to the threats that we might have in the future, or that's just because fact checking is becoming much more popular? So, do you see any potential new areas for fact checkers in the future?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we see that there are many fields of science where we can expand, and we only want to go to these spaces where there is misinformation. So I think energy and environment are fields that we don't cover, and I think many fact checkers don't cover either. Like renewable energy, can it sustain society, whatever. These kind of questions are not covered, I think, and that's one topic. But otherwise, I think beyond that, there is one kind of investigative work that we should be doing, even the fact checkers and other as well, is who is behind all this misinformation. I think that's also something that we don't do a lot of, and at least I think it's some kind of topic where we should be investigating more.
David? Absolutely. I think that there are potential for other areas of topical fact-checking. So I'll use the Nigerian context again. I think apart from just health-specific fact-checking, there's also a room for infrastructure fact-checking and economic, topical areas like the economy. Because we had during the last elections, most of the conversation was about, oh, we've built this, we've built that, we've done this, we've done that. And I think that if there's expertise in that area where people actually verify how many kilometers of roads were built, how many megawatts of power, it's a useful conversation to Nigerians because it's something that also affects them. Yeah.
Angie?
I think that we still have some room to go in healthcare fact-checking. I think we at Politifact especially could do more consumer-oriented fact-checking. I also see in the healthcare area that there is a need for not so much fact-checking per se, but like what I would call fact sheets or explainers on healthcare, where we're not doing debunks, but we're offering thorough, solid information about the truth about vaccines or other topics. I would love to see a more, and maybe it would be under Politifact or maybe a Politifact Health, do more consumer-oriented pieces to how people stay healthy, because there's a lot of misinformation around that. We've always talked about doing some sort of fact-checking enterprise around buying and spending consumer goods, kind of like you see an ad on TV, is that ad true? Fact-checking, so fact-checking claims in advertising. We haven't got into that at all, but we've talked about it. And then finally, we have a side project that I just want to mention, and this isn't serious, this is just fun. We call it Movie Fact. And when the serious movies come out that say they're based on real events, we write fact-checking stories of, they say it's real, but how real is it? And we would love to have a whole movie fact site, but we haven't been able to figure out a source of financing for it. So what happens is every year during the film season, we do 4 or 5 stories that we call Movie Fact, where we fact-check the movies, and it's fun.
You just launched a book club. Probably you are thinking about launching a film club as well, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe a follow-up question, or maybe I can hear from Eugene before we leave for the questions. Do you think this is also potential for monetization for fact checkers, expanding to other topical areas? You think that's also a driving force for the expansion of this topical fact checking?
Our side check project was initiated by the Stanton Foundation. Stanton Foundation is run, or was founded by Frank Stanton, who was the CBS president, the late Frank Stanton. So yeah, funders are interested in new things. And if you could say that we're going to create something new, we're going to brand this for you, if it's on health, if it's on environment, if it's on science, those are the kinds of things that have great appeal to these foundations.
Thank you so much. Would you like to add anything before we leave for the questions?
Yeah. One thing one thought in general is I think if we want to scale the fact-checking, at some point we need to think about ways to not just do the fact-checking the way we have done, even though fact-checking is growing and the database and everything, but at some point we either need to do automation to really scale the impact that we are having, or we need to crowdsource in one way or another. And that's a challenge because you cannot just open it and say, let's all fact-check. There are many projects who tried and failed. So one thing that can be done, I think, is to open it to communities where we can verify the expertise. So in our case, we try to open to a community of scientists where we can verify that they have publications. And by the way, if you have expert sources, verify what publications they have and the quality, because you also have now a lot of publications that are junk, scientific journals, I mean, where you just pay and you can publish. So you really need to check for that. But I'm thinking that maybe there are other communities where you can find other rules that you could embark in your own fact-checking organizations.
Right. Thanks so much. Any questions?
Hi, I'm Noah from The Whistle in Israel. So I was wondering, how are we tackling the fact that the public mistrust in health institution and medical institution is not entirely baseless? I mean, there are some good reasons to be not trusting, and especially in the face of what's happening with the climate change, or now the climate crisis that has been denied for so long by governments and decision makers, and now it's like globally accepted all of a sudden, and this is like a proof, you cannot trust them, and eventually everyone will see that that vaccines are in fact dangerous and whatever, if you get what I mean. I mean, this is...
What is the
So
question?
how do we tackle this mistrust? I mean, in this basic mistrust, and the fact that sometimes it's proven to be right, sometimes in the past, especially in medical or big pharma or
Right. Well, I think for Politifact, when we find a claim that seems where like the scientific evidence is controversial, we tend not to rate it. We basically write a story and we say that we can't come to a conclusion about this claim, so we're not rating it. I can't think of an example where we fact-checked something based on scientific evidence where we had to reverse ourselves. Because usually if it gets through our process, the science is settled at that point. I do think that we have to hold ourselves to a very high standard with the sourcing on scientific claims because of the mistrust. But I think that unless people come into a topic with some really strongly preconceived ideas, I think most of the audience, and certainly our readers, are open to new ideas if they're backed up by evidence, if the sourcing is explained carefully. There have also been some studies recently on effectiveness of correction and the best way to do that, and I'm looking at this research really carefully. Some of you may remember Letitia Bode from Georgetown University, who's come to this conference before. She's not here this year, but she does research on correcting healthcare misinformation, and she's come up with some techniques that what's more effective and what's not. So we look at that. I mean, I think you're right that people do have legitimate suspicions of the scientific community and the medical community, especially if they come from populations that have experienced oppression or discrimination at the hands of the medical community, which certainly some groups have. So I think we need to be very sensitive about it. But ultimately, I do think with most of the things that we decide to publish and go forward on, the scientific standards are fairly high. And if we can just communicate that sourcing to the audience, then the fact checks tend to be solid.
Thank you. Quickly add. I think what your comment is also based on is the fact that in the health science, there are some scientists who are actually paid by industries. So I think the work that we need to do then is to at least try and find whether the scientist we use as a source has a conflict of interest. So yeah, I think we all try and do that the best way we can. But
So
yeah, we
that's
also
the same. I mean, when we talk about the reliability of data, and also the reliability of the expert is also the same.
Yeah, it's one source. It's a source like another data. It just has the data in his mind.
Hi. I was wondering if you've ever tested or experimented with putting up claims, positive, true fact check claims like the world is flat. It's not flat, or like something like that, to see if you can beat Google's search. I know some people in Spain have done it. That's what I'm asking, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we've not tried the Earth is flat. We're not yet in astronomy, but I think it's quite important, especially on YouTube. So we have not tried that, but there are many things that we have fact-checked that I think are the same kind of level of, it's a big conspiracy, it's completely a hoax. So yeah, we have examples like this, and I think the claim review schema helps us rise to the top of the search results. But yeah, we have not yet started the flat Earth on our end.
I do want to say that we pay a lot of attention to Google keywords when we set the headlines, especially for healthcare stories. I feel like one area where we could work with Google more would be in doing the kind of proactive, here are true facts. And I was, based on my conversations with some of the Google people, I think they're aware that this is an area that needs help, and I know it's on their radar and they're looking at it, because there are some, I don't know if you've ever Googled like your own medical problems. I certainly have. And like sometimes the results are not great because there's just like not a lot out there. So I think that's an area that we can look at into getting into that area and saying like, here is verified, accurate information about what we do know.
And I tell my family if they have a headache, just don't go online and Google it. So the first thing that you do before buying a drug.
That means maybe we should pay attention more to the misinformation on Google and YouTube, because I think as a community we've done a lot about Twitter and Facebook, and I know that there are some scientists who look at YouTube recommendations, but I think the fact checkers have not really occupied that space, so that would be really a next move.
I was just wondering, I know that Politifact and FactChecking, they have a really cool collaboration in, is it still up? Yeah.
Our part is over, FactChecking.
Oh, okay. So I would love to see a collaboration in health and science among fact checkers, because I am pretty sure we have all debunked false information about something curing cancer, something curing diabetes. And I am sure we needed a cool database of all false substances trying to cure cancer. I mean, it doesn't matter, like a fact-check EU thing in many languages, they just put it all there. And we could, because we do in Portuguese, we read your stuff and we feel so confident that you did it. And it's a lot easier for us because you did it before, right? If we, and I could easily say that could be some, that IFCN could do, a project to get all your, we could choose like diabetes or cancer or start from one point and just bring all this information into one place and start and translating into different languages. And this would be so cool. Let's collaborate in health. Let's choose that. I mean, that's an idea that I have, and I've been thinking about that. I was thinking about Portuguese and Spanish for obvious reasons, but why not expanding this? I would love to hear your opinion on that.
There was also, yeah, please.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I mean, I don't think there's anybody here who would disagree with that. from our perspective, for example, working with the Facebook project, I almost stopped eating pancakes. Why? Because we kept seeing this claim about don't mix banana and milk. And then the anatomy of that is that it's such that it jumps from country to country. So it jumps from, you see it in Pakistan, it goes to India, comes to Nigeria, then you see it in South Africa. And I think that if we have sort of a coalition of sorts, you know, I mean, we don't have to waste much time doing that. We just take it, rate it, pop it, and yeah, that's it. I think that's a great idea.
Christina, I love that idea too. And I thought what Peter said in his opening remarks was really interesting about querying doctors. Like, I mean, could we as a group ask doctors, well, what is the biggest global health threat right now? Is it diabetes? Is it something else? I mean, I have no idea what they would say. And like, maybe we could, whatever disease or condition they select, we could make that a topic for International Fact-Checking Day. And we could all do content on it. I love that idea.
I'm also on that, but yeah, I think it needs funding, some kind of. And yeah, we definitely track stories as they go from English to German to so many languages. In Denmark, we see the same things, and we would like to tell someone. So yeah, at the very least, we need a communication channel saying, these are all the different countries, something we have detected is propagating. So yeah, let's start like that.
I had a quick question about video and how you're thinking about video production, which is obviously more expensive, but also, you know, you're talking about fact sheets, but also making high quality video on this topic is something I'm interested to hear more about. And then another area that I was curious about is when you kind of go and fact check, do you ever kind of annotate high quality sources of information on the matter? Or when you're asking doctors, here are some videos or here are some facts that are, you know, not ours, but are actually authoritative in our opinion and the people we work with opinion, is that's just like valuable data. So I'm just curious how you think about that.
Politifact is doing a little bit of video. I would like us to do more. I would very much like us to have more of a presence on YouTube. We have a very minimal presence on YouTube. I think we need to find resources to have staff with a lot of experience in video. We don't have anyone like that on our staff right now. We are primarily from print backgrounds for the most part. But it kind of breaks my heart to say it because I'm a writer and an editor person, but I think the future is going towards video, and that's how people are getting their information. I don't like video the way I like print. That's my bias, but I think we need to be in video. We need to be doing it, and speaking for my organization, I know we're not doing it enough, and we're working on it. Your other question about highlighting high-quality sources, we do some of that naturally, like in the text of a story, we'll cite good studies, good sources, but we probably could do it more.
All right. Thank you so much.